What's up, Diablo full players? So let's go over all of the gems that you want to throw in your pieces of gear to get the most value. So starting right off, a lot of people may assume, okay, well, it's just standard. You go for emeralds or sapphires, then you go ahead and throw in rubies and diamonds. And that's kind of the generic go-to for majority of people. However, things are a little bit different in Season 4. Season 4 actually changed up what some of the gems actually do, depending on the slot. And it's actually going to be sort of build dependent, but there's actually other multipliers that you may want to consider depending on your build. So to be honest, it really depends on what you're playing. There's not one answer for every single person, but for majority of players in your weapon slot, unless you happen to have 80% or higher crit, you're going to want to throw in sapphires for your weapons. You want to throw in rubies for your armors, and then for your jewelry, it's usually some sort of filler for resistances, or if you really need that extra armor, you can go ahead and throw in skulls. That's kind of the generic thing for most builds. However, it is different in Season 4 because there are certain Paragon nodes that you will not be able to hit depending on the class that you play. And let me go ahead and give you guys some examples, because what has actually changed in Season 4 is you're able to get a plus 100 to a bunch of the stats that you normally could not get. That would be your main stat for your character. Like if I'm playing the Sorceress, getting extra intelligence is actually pretty valuable if I want to go ahead and add more damage in the armor category. However, if you want to even get more damage potentially, depending on your Paragon node, that will actually matter. And let me go ahead and kind of give you guys a better example. So for this example, we're going to be using the Sorceress, and we're going to be using this node over here called Frigid. Now, if I put in this glyph that gives me some sort of bonus to all rare nodes or magic nodes within some sort of a range, that can actually increase. And when you reach the bonus threshold for having that dexterity, willpower, or any other stat, with the exception of intelligence, because most classes, you'll hit the threshold on every single one, because in Season 4, it's really easy to get those greater affix plus to your main stat. However, now you're able to get these Paragon boards later, depending on the build that you play. It may require, let's say, 400 or 500 dexterity, and dexterity is not something that you usually get on the Sorceress. So to actually put in one of your armor pieces, let's say you wanted that extra dexterity, right? It doesn't really matter what armor we're putting on, but let's go ahead and say we throw in something for dexterity. And normally in the armor, you would think, oh, you want to go ahead and throw in rubies. And that is not always going to be the case. Now, in this instance over here, just for getting that node hit, we actually get a bonus of another 13.5 damage reduction from the chilled enemies. That is going to be more valuable than the HP that we would get normally by putting in a ruby in the chest. Now, obviously, since this is the Paragon board number 2, that's a really easy 260, you'll hit that. But what if we put that same board like further down the line? As you add more Paragon boards, these yellow nodes will cost more and more of, let's say, willpower, dexterity, or whatever the case is. Now, if it is intelligence, it doesn't really matter too much. If you want to hit that, you can put it way later in the Paragon board. But if it's something that you want to hit earlier on, you do need to put it closer to the start of your Paragon board. It doesn't matter in terms of the location, but it's the number of Paragon boards that you ordered in. So like, for example, this one, it says start number 1, this is number 2. So this is something that's important to take into consideration. It's not in relation to how close it is to the starting board, but in the order that you placed it in. Hopefully that kind of makes some sense, because some people were asking, how come on my Paragon board it says I only need a certain amount, but on theirs it's a completely different number? That's why it matters in the order of your Paragon boards. But again, this is where, for some instances, it's better to throw in a different one. And this goes even further when we're talking about other stats in the game. Now, maybe your character can benefit off of having vulnerable damage. Maybe your character is more of a beneficial stat to get crit strike damage. And to go further into this, let's take the Rogue, for example. Right now, the Heartseeker Rogue, very, very popular. And if we look at one of the nodes that you can get, where it says dealing direct damage to a vulnerable enemy has some sort of chance to do something, right? And then it says your damage is increased by some amount X of your vulnerable damage, your crit damage. It could be, your main character stat. Like, for example, with the Sorceress, there's one that says bonus for every 25 intelligence that you have. So then you would start wanting to stack that other stat. There's actually another one for, I think for crackling energy that you can get that does more damage. Where is it? for every int that you've purchased within some sort of range. So obviously the Paragon board location would matter, but there are other glyphs and things based off of how much you have in one sort of damage category. So even if, like before, I was mentioning that if you happen to have like 80% or more in terms of the crit strike chance, that you'd want to go for emeralds because the number is just a little bit high. You get 5% more as long as you're hitting crits. Most builds will not reach 100% crit. That's totally fine, but it's more of a benefit. Let's say if I was to play a rogue and I wanted that bonus to crit, let's say I'm playing precision, then even though sapphires may have more of an uptime, because let's say I have like 50% crit, right? The precision allows us to get crits, and this goes across all characters because I don't want to make a video going over every single skill, otherwise this video would be way too long and unnecessary. But I'm trying to get you guys to think about what is your character's build actually doing, because this gives you more damage based on your crit, where this is more damage on your vulnerable. So you want to build your character to maybe throw in the sapphires instead. So as far as weapons go, it really depends on what you're trying to go for, but in general, obviously if you're playing like a basic build, like a Bash Barbarian, then you want to throw in the topazes, but that should be like a no-brainer. But I'm trying to go over the things that you may not see that are a little bit different, and again, in some of the armor pieces, it's very valuable to go ahead and get your character's main stat if you don't need more survivability. If you need more survivability, Ruby is going to be one of the better ones, but you can also get more survivability, again, where I just showed you on the Sorceress over here, that extra bonus. If I was to put this Paragon node super far away, I would not reach that 13.5 damage reduction. That is almost kind of like half of an aspect, so to speak. So that would be more valuable than throwing in a Ruby if this dexterity Paragon board was super far later. But obviously you can move your Paragon boards, but sometimes you need to order it in a certain way in order to reach whatever threshold, right? So as far as like the weapons go, it's kind of up to you what you want to throw in. Again, depends on the build, basic tax, topazes, and then it's going to be different if you're running some build that can benefit off crit strikes, or if you're doing some sort of damage over time build, then yeah, again, that's relatively straightforward. Originally in the game though, there were some builds that were running skulls because it wasn't really that bad, but now I think things have changed. No one's really playing it. The amount of life on kill that you get is just very mediocre. It's basically a non-existent to throw in skulls though. As far as the armor places, we already kind of went over that. Basically survivability is going to be rubies, but you can get even more survivability if you need willpower, or whatever class you're playing can reach another bonus on the yellow. And keep in mind, that's not only one of them. You may get some sort of bonus to dexterity that can hit two things that are like super far later down the line. So think about that as well. And plus, with getting just straight up dexterity on the Sorceress, you get extra crit strike chance. Granted, it's pretty small, but hey, any amount is still an advantage, right? Now, as far as the jewelry goes, in the amulets, the rings, most people will probably throw in diamonds to grant yourself all resistance. Nothing has really changed here in the jewelry department, but ideally, yeah, you try to max out your resistances. Diamond usually is the one that most people will be throwing in, but if you happen to roll a couple pieces of gear that maybe have one resistance, then you might need another set of resistances, whether that's shadow res, cold res. You just need to kind of fill out your resistances, obviously throw these in. But let's say that you are completely res capped and you're completely armor capped. What do you throw in? There really isn't anything in the jewelry department. Now it's really easy to reach that 9,230 cap of armor. Once you reach that, you do not need any more armor. They have removed the armor shred mechanic. You used to be able to go over a certain amount because if the monster would hit you, it would shred your armor, giving you reduced armor, but that doesn't exist anymore, so you don't need to overcap. 9,230 is the most amount of armor that you will need in the entire game. Going over it will not give you extra bonus damage reduction, so that's kind of important. But if you happen to really want to min-max your character, let's say all your resistances are good, you could consider maybe not rolling armor as a tempering stat, and then you can throw in skulls. But for the most part, the jewelry, it's usually just used for the resistances. There's not really any use for armor in most circumstances. Most people will either throw in Juggernaut, or they're going to meet the requirements by other means, but if you need to, it is kind of there as another option. But this has not changed. It's basically in the weapon department, things have changed, as well as in the armor, because on the Paragon nodes, there's a bunch of threshold numbers that have changed because we don't have all stats rolling on weapons, which is something that you used to be able to do, and also used to be able to throw an attack speed in the weapons, but they moved that from the PTR. So basically, I know that this was kind of an extended video, but I needed to explain like all these little like niche situations where you actually do receive quite a bit of benefit from going into one thing. things. So example, if you're playing anything that benefits off of it, run it. Anyways, that's going to go ahead and wrap it up. Hope you guys learned something new, and this video was informative. If you did, drop a like on it. If you're new here, hit subscribe, turn on the bell so you don't miss out on more Diablo and other gaming content. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.